Now.
Okay. This worked fine at home, and then I brought it here and it did not work fine.
Well, we got
okay.
it. Thank you, citizen.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the Philly Funtasia panel. Out of curiosity, who here is already somewhat familiar with the show? Has seen it?
I've seen it on Netflix and passed by it every time.
Do they happen to have the other half of the season yet?
What?
No, he's passed by it.
No,
every
it's
time.
not even on
Yeah.
Dailymotion yet.
Okay, so who's not seen any of it and is just here out of curiosity?
I just saw previews, and then it went on hiatus for like 3 years or whatever it was.
It was like half a decade.
Yeah.
I'll get into all that.
Even more. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to try to provide something of an introduction to the show. So those who don't know anything about it, hopefully you'll kind of learn a basic introduction. For those who have seen some of it and kind of know what it's about, I want to also go into a little bit of depth about like the background of the Philly franchise, the toy lines, and so maybe you'll learn something there also. I'm Midnight Fire, by the way. This is Luck Rock. Hello.
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 So, what is Philly Funtasia? Well, Philly Funtasia is a show that's aired in Italy starting this year. It's a product of the company Draco, which is a very popular toy line, especially in Europe, particularly Germany. At its height, it was the #1 girls' toy in Germany. They're known for their fuzzy little horse figurines with Swarovski crystals in their crowns.
That doesn't sound like it would work.
No. So they also have other merchandise. They have a monthly magazine that they put out. It's put out by a company called Blue Ocean, and it always has a little panel, it's like 6-page comic in it with little stories. They also contain information about like Philly lore, Philly stories, things like that. They have plushes. This image in the bottom right is a little out of date. That was actually taken from the third promo for the show. It says 66 million sold. That was back in 2014 or something like that when that came out. It's actually now up to over 100 million figures sold. So it's quite popular in Europe. So to start at the beginning, the company Draco was founded in Denmark by these guys here on the left. That is brothers Jacob and Henrik Andersen. And they founded Draco in 1997, and then in 2000 moved it to Hong Kong. The actual Philly toy line was created by this lady on the right here, whose name I'm probably butchering, Time Norbol. In 2006, it's some kind of like Danish, Scandinavian name or something.
So it was a toy line first, is what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. She developed the toy line in 2006, and it first came out as an actual toy in 2007. Right here, this is Philly Forest, which is the first toy line from the Philly franchise. At the time, it was just called Philly because there were no other toy lines associated with it to differentiate it from. But this was kind of a little bit of an educational toy at the time. They had multiple figures based on real-life horse breeds, and each toy kind of had its own little card describing its a little bit of background about it. You see in the upper right there, you have one of them, and they gave each character a score based on beauty, speed, and intelligence. And on the bottom here, you can see some of the toys associated with their real-life horse counterparts. From left to right, that's an Andalusian horse, a Jutland horse, and interestingly enough, an extinct quagga.
I like the idea of the score that the company was just like, here's some toys we made, they're not very good.
So Philly Forest was followed by Philly Beach Party in 2008. It followed a similar kind of style, but they added the first fantasy elements into the toy line here with the inclusion of 2 winged horses and a pegacorn. And This was followed up by what's now considered to be kind of the more classic Philly toy lines, and I'm going to get into more detail about them later. But the gist is that Philly kind of blew up at this point. It became huge in Europe. So you've got this wildly popular toy line. What are you going to do now? Create a television show to promote it. And that's exactly what they did.
It's revolutionary.
Nobody had ever thought to do this before.
Absolutely no one.
No, actually, so a lot of people, when this first dropped, were saying, oh, this is just a My Little Pony ripoff, which isn't really the case, because when you consider the history of the toy lines, they kind of follow completely separate paths. Again, Philly was kind of started as almost an educational toy in a way, whereas My Little Pony was kind of like a horse doll, I guess. So they created their show to promote it. Essentially, it's a similar marketing strategy to My Little Pony, yes, but it's not really a ripoff per se. It's got a completely different feel to it from My Little Pony. So in summer of 2012, work began on the show. Draco partnered with BRB International, a Spanish animation company, which is probably best remembered for the show David the Gnome. Anybody remember that one? I'm kind of like dating myself here by saying that I actually remember watching that as a kid. Screen 21 is BRB's animation studio, and Ty Norbull, again, was the pitch Bible writer for the show. Carlos Byrne was in charge of BRB at the time, and he said he was really excited about the show because he was looking for a show for their studio that had strong toy-driven success, and he wanted something to kind of fill their gap in animation for young girls, which they didn't have at the time, and this show kind of fit perfectly into that. Up in the upper right here, that's Black Dragon Studio, which was in China. Oh, there's my, okay.
Yeah, it can go over there.
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
gotta watch that.
Okay.
Technology.
Yeah. I was like looking all over for it. Okay.
Your mouse is in Philly Funtasia.
Cool.
You can do
Where?
this.
Yes.
You got this. There you go.
Okay, there I am. Okay, so that kind of wraps that up. So late 2012 was the intense phase of production for the show. A lot of planning and concept art was being produced by BRB at this time, and this is a bit of the. Why is it not showing up there?
You gotta hit resume slideshow.
Oh, did I?
Uh-oh. Now scroll down.
Okay, so everything I just said, pretend I said it during this slide right here. Okay, I'm gonna get through this.
So we're almost to the TV show.
Yeah. We're in the production stage. There's a lot that's gonna happen before this TV show gets released. So overall, I'm actually very impressed by the quality of this art. One of the things that I really like about the show, even though the final product isn't necessarily completely polished looking, is that you can tell by this art that people did put a lot of work into it. They had a very clear idea of what they wanted with this show, and they put effort into it, which I appreciate that, and I can see that they had a vision here. Here's a little bit more art. It might be kind of hard to see at times. I know I like crammed a bunch of pictures into one slide, but all this art is online and you can see a lot better pictures of it.
This is all official, like, show art.
Yeah, this is all like
That was all pitched?
concept art, yes. So there were some storyboards in there also, I think.
Pretty impressive for
Yeah,
for all that to be official material.
Right, it's because when you look at the trailers and whatnot, you gotta consider like all that was like behind it, and it's kind of surprising when you think about it. So along with the animation department, Draco set out to get writers for this show, and they opted for writers from the American market. Incidentally, I love the ending sequence here. I just took this screen cap because it's got the script writers there, but I love how all the characters kind of like interact with each other in the final credits. It's kind of better than just having static names on a screen, I think. But anyways, So there's a lot of new names as far as writers go, but they also have a lot of veteran talent behind this show. Dean Stefan there is one name, and he was known for working on the show Darkwing Duck, Cat Dog.
Oh, wow.
The early pitch Bible mentioned that they had a writer who worked on Batman the Animated Series working on this. Although that person's name I actually don't see on this list, so I don't know if they ever made it into the final production or not. But no doubt the biggest name that you see here is at the top, Jim Megan. He's best known for his work with Disney. And he not only wrote for, but he also developed the show Gummy Bears as well as DuckTales. And I'm sure people have seen a Goofy movie.
Yes.
He wrote that.
Oh,
Not just the like one of the assistant writers in it. He was like the primary writer for that movie. So the show has some like major talent behind it in some of the writing. So he's won 2 Emmy Awards, been nominated for 3 more, and on top of all that, he also wrote at least 2 of the episodes that have aired so far from Philly Funtasia.
How many episodes have aired so far?
It's like 13, isn't it?
13?
Yeah, half a season. On top of that, he also wrote a 75-minute special for Philly Funtasia based on the Philly Butterfly line, and that's what this concept art on the screen here is. Unfortunately, that's probably never going to see the light of day. It is confirmed that a script has been written for it, but due to all the legal issues that happened behind the show, all of the drama and everything, it's probably never going to get made, which I'm kind of disappointed by. Yeah, I see potential here. Another interesting thing is if you watch the show and you see the first episode, there's really no introduction to the characters or anything like that. It just feels like you're kind of like thrown right into the world and all its goings on. The general idea is that these 75-minute specials, there was also supposed to be one based on Philly Stars, but this one is Philly Butterfly. And these 75-minute specials were supposed to act kind of as like a pilot to the show. And so most of the characters would have been introduced here in these 75-minute specials, and that's why the show feels a little kind of disjointed when you first get into it. So, 2013, early 2013.
Who remembers this?
Yeah. 2 people. Absolute hype.
I absolutely remember when this came out, or when this trailer dropped. Actually, early 2013 was the first kind of teaser, and that got largely overlooked. That was just the character Rose kind of prancing around in the field for a few seconds, followed by saying, like, coming soon, Philly Funtasia, nothing there. But late 2013, that's when, like, the real trailer that everybody remembers dropped. And that happened at MIPCOM, which is a big event in France, kind of geared towards the television industry. And MIPCOM would be important for the Philly franchise coming up. Every year at MIPCOM, something new would release, or MIP-TV. I don't know if it's MIP-TV, I don't know. But they would often drop new teasers, trailers, new information about how the show's coming at these events. So first one was 2013, October. This dropped, and hey, what are some other things that were going on in the cartoon horse related fandoms at this time, 2013?
October 2013.
Equestria Girls,
Yep.
Twilacorn.
Twilight Got Wings.
Oh, I remember those.
So hey, a new cartoon horse show. Let's throw another thing on the drama fire. So yeah, that got a lot of attention, and it was to be released in 2014. So what happened?
Nothing.
Well, let me introduce you to another player in the Philly saga. Simba Dickey is a major German toy producer. They were founded in 1982, and they partnered with Draco, or rather Draco partnered with them in 2007 to produce Philly toys, starting with the Philly Forest line all the way back when that first started. And Simba was key to Draco's success. they were able to get them into the European market and were instrumental in the success of Philly, especially in Germany. As I said, #1 toy in Germany for girls at its height. However, Simba Dickey also had other toy lines not associated with Philly, some of which bore a striking resemblance to other horse-related toys from a certain American company. And this resulted in not one, but 2 lawsuits, which Simba lost.
Of course.
And
Hasbro wouldn't sue anybody. That doesn't sound like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding. So this pony here is clearly a G3 pony. So this actually started before G4 even came out. But the lawsuit ended in 2013, and that's when Simba was forced to pay a major fine. Things started kind of spiraling downhill from there. In early 2014, Simba breaks off its licensing agreement with Draco, just a few months after the promo aired. Now, there's no evidence that this is directly related to the Hasbro lawsuit, but the timing is certainly suspicious, especially considering that shortly after this, Simba got a very lucrative contract with Hasbro to produce Transformers toys. So, nothing suspicious there. Soon after that, Draco files a lawsuit against Simba, alleging that they sold off their remaining stock of Philly toys without paying the proper licensing fees. Without going into a ton of detail about this, what follows is a series of lawsuits and appeals between Draco and Simba that are actually still going on to this day. The general takeaway is that Draco has been dealing with seemingly endless legal battles for the last half-decade.
So,
And
I got a question about that then.
Okay.
So if Simba had if none of the Hasbro stuff had happened, just pretend that didn't exist, and Simba had just done their portion of their agreement, is there reason to believe that the show would have just gone on in 2014 like it was supposed to?
I believe it would have. I actually think it would, because all these kind of legal issues ended up costing ended up costing Draco a great deal of money. The company went deep into the red, and Draco is not doing well financially right now at all.
It's in 2019 right now?
Yes, 2019 right now. And it's all because of these lawsuits that started with Simba back in 2014. Well, they eventually found a replacement for Simba. There was a company called Goliath to produce their toys, but they didn't have the same kind of success with them. As I said, it's no longer the #1 girls' toy in Germany. It's still pretty high. It's still pretty popular in Germany. It's not as popular in certain other parts of Europe as it was at the time.
How's Transformers doing in Europe?
I'm sure they're doing quite well. Okay, but that's only half of the story. Simba was responsible for the toys, but again, BRB International was producing the actual show. So while all this stuff was going on with Simba, the release date is getting pushed back further and further from early 2014 to late 2014, 2015, 2016. Finally, in late 2015, we get the last date, the last potential release date out of 2017. Then things kind of go dark for a while. No more news is coming out. In late 2015, the Philly YouTube channel releases this kind of a holiday promo / Merry Christmas video, which is what this clip is from. It's basically just a few clips, or this image, it's basically a few clips of the show with kind of a wintry filter over it, saying Happy Holidays at the end. And that's the last promotional material that we would get out of the show for the next 3 years.
No.
I know. Yeah, I picked up on that. So around the same time, BRB and Screen 21 start scrubbing their website of any reference at all to Philly Funtasia.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, clearly something is not going well behind the scenes. And now, it's not entirely clear what's causing this, but the general idea is that it seems BRB stopped actively working on the show in late 2015 because Draco either became unable or unwilling to continue to pay them. And it isn't until 2017 that we really get confirmation on what everybody's kind of suspected up until this point, which is that BRB is no longer involved at all with Philly Funtasia. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. While news about Philly Funtasia to the public is practically non-existent, Draco is out looking for a new studio to try to get its show released. And they find Water Animation Studios here, and that is a studio based in Germany, but they also have a small studio in Barcelona, Spain, and that's the one that they got to work on Philly Funtasia. They also began their own studio in China called Guangzhou Huame Animation. If you've seen the show, if you watch like the opening credits at the very near the first scene right there, Guangzhou Huame, that studio is owned by Draco. This image on the right is from its opening day, and you can see a picture of Rose there. There's actually several pictures out there from the opening day of this studio, and Philly is very prominently displayed in all of them. It seems that this studio exists solely for the purpose of making Philly Funtasia. So, around the same time, 2018, the Anderson brothers give an interview, and they say, well, we're hoping things are going to turn around with the Philly franchise because we have a television show airing next year. They specifically say 2019, Philly is coming out. They say we've got deals with a bunch of different countries to release it, and notably mention Italy. Then, seemingly without notice, in March 3rd of 2019, the Italian channel, Frisbee, announces that they will be airing the show in March of that month. The long wait is over.
March of that month.
Sorry.
That comes after the other month.
Yeah. So, Philly is here. So what did we get? Well, I remember the trailer from 2013, and to me, it didn't seem like anything mind-blowing. It was just another kind of cheesy-looking G3 knockoff. No, really.
I see it.
Who would have guessed that people would get that impression? Yeah. But yeah, I remember the trailer from way back when, so I'm like, okay, I gotta give this a chance because it's been a long time coming. So I went in with very low expectations. And so imagine my surprise when not only is it not just a cheesy G3 ripoff, but it was actually pretty good in its own way. I think the important thing to consider when looking at this show is not to compare it to My Little Pony, really. It's its own show with its own style. Funtasia is its own world, and it has its own lore. It follows its own kind of style, which I think is more similar really to Harry Potter than it would be to My Little Pony, story-wise. You got like this magical academy, you got kind of a recurring villain. This isn't really My Little Pony style show.
I'd actually say that almost makes it sound like Winx Club in the early days, given its focus on the young girl market.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Okay. So I would say again, don't expect it to match the best of My Little Pony, but certainly the best episodes of Philly Funtasia, I think, would definitely hold their own against like average MLP.
Why would you say something so bold but so controversial?
So, in general, it's better than every Spike episode?
Oh.
Shots fired.
I mean, this show basically has Spike in it. So.
Yeah, I was about to say.
There is a Spike character.
The little flying
Yeah, but
package.
it takes Spike abuse to the next level.
Yeah. But isn't that what we love about Spike?
Hey.
Yeah, so I mean, it's charming and simple without like dumbing itself down too much. I was expecting it to be a lot more juvenile than it ended up being. It doesn't really rely on like memes and meta humor, I guess. It kind of relies on itself, if that makes sense. I think its greatest strength is probably in its writing. As I said, it does have some veteran talent there among the writers. Interestingly, it kind of starts off very slice of life and then gradually becomes more adventure based as it goes. Okay. So characters are interesting enough. Interestingly, it has a very strong male presence. If you include the secondary students who aren't really a part of the main cast, I would say there's actually more male students at this academy who have like significant speaking roles and whatnot than female ones, which is kind of interesting for a show geared towards little girls. It has an interesting world.
Uh-oh. Okay.
No, we're there. Okay. This is like the opening shot from the opener. First thing you see. And a lot of the lore from the show is hinted at here. Funtasia itself is a floating island. You can see the floating island in between the Phillies here. The academy sits on top of that. The academy is where students go to learn about magic, which in this world, magic comes from crystals, and they use these magic mirrors in order to kind of harness these crystals. I'd say the biggest weakness of the show is the inconsistent animation.
That bottom left one. That's not real, is it?
That is indeed a real, all these are real screenshots from the show.
Okay.
Sometimes the animation looks very detailed and good, like on the right here, and sometimes it really does not, like on the left. There's a theory that the show was rushed into completion. They had to get it ready by a certain deadline, so they some of the animation came off as very crude, kind of cheap looking for this reason. They couldn't quite get it polished in time, which I think this theory kind of holds up because both of these images on the left, are actually from towards the end of the released season so far. So if they're kind of scrambling to get those episodes finished, it kind of makes sense then that those are the ones that feel less polished. If you can't tell, that upper left image, those are supposed to be leaves.
That's
Oh boy.
that's what I had a feeling.
No. Oh, no.
That's
Oh,
a
those
tree,
are
right?
that's the tree.
Yep.
You guys have seen trees, yes?
Oh,
Yes,
Oh,
trees. Yeah, trees are supposed to look like that.
It's a
There's
Nintendo
no
64
smog
tree.
in
Okay. But,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think the Phillies themselves actually look pretty
Shipping.
good. They're animated nicely. Their faces can be very expressive. It looks pretty good in motion. The animation is very fluid. I think the detail in the eyes is incredible, to be honest.
What's happening in that top right one?
That is
You'll just have to watch
Yeah.
to find out.
yeah.
It's real.
It exists.
Everything exists.
It exists.
Of course. Do you have a slide on Philly Guru?
I don't actually. But
He runs it.
Watch your filters.
There's no filters on that website.
no, I don't think there are.
There's like
What's happening here?
Okay, anyways, so another thing I want to mention is the soundtrack because it's kind of one of the more interesting aspects of the show, which if you've seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. It makes use of a lot of pop songs that get repeated through the series a lot. Very repetitive soundtrack. I don't think that a lot of them are bad songs, to be honest. They're kind of catchy, they can feel fun. but they also feel very out of place at times. Like they really don't match what is going on in the scene, but I think that's kind of one of the quirky aspects of the show that I enjoy in a way. It's something that sort of grows on you. So I want to kind of move on and describe the characters of the show, and in doing so, I'm going to talk about the different toy lines associated with each of the characters. So I'm going to kind of go in chronological order in introducing the characters based on where I left off earlier with Philly Beach Party, which Philly Forest and Philly Beach Party are kind of considered non-canon in the Philly toy line now. Where it really becomes more official is with Cedric here.
That is such a lovely expression.
Cedric is represented by the Philly Princess toy line. He's kind of intelligent and inventive. He seems to lack social skills. He hasn't really had much time to shine in this show so far. He's only had one episode where he comes off as kind of awkward and obsessive.
Can I mention very quickly, this is a weird distinction to make if you're like heavy into MLP. All of the characters in this are technically Phillies.
Yes.
It is the toy line.
Yeah,
So
to
Cedric
be clear,
is a Philly.
Yes.
And that's very disjointing the first few times you watch it.
Philly is kind of like considered its own species. There was a representative from Draco who said, Philly Forest, those were horses. Those are toys based on real life horses. Once the Philly Princess toy line began, they're no longer horses, they are fillies. Philly is like its own equine species in a way.
What's the age if it's its own species, then what's the
Yes.
age? Like,
The school age.
Yeah, they're described as teenagers, I guess.
They don't have specific terms for their various young.
So,
Yeah, so a young female filly is all the same as an older male filly, I guess. Yeah.
Figure that one
They're
out.
all fillies. Actually, Cedric is from two toy lines. As I said, Philly Princess, which came out in 2009 following Philly Beach Party, but also Philly Royale, which is kind of a remake of Philly Princess. And I find that the Philly Royale description for Cedric is a little more on point with his show character than the Philly Princess version, because the Philly Princess version, kind of his description just says, oh, he likes tournaments, and that's kind of it. The Philly Royale version kind of went into a bit more detail, saying he's very intelligent and likes inventions. It makes me wonder if they kind of developed that a little alongside the show, to having the show in mind when they created his personality there. But Philly Princess kind of marks the split into their own species, as I said, and they live in the Philly Kingdom. And there's only one family here, and you can kind of see the family tree. It's based on a hierarchy. There's an emperor and empress at the top. At the bottom, they have like dukes, duchesses, that kind of thing. No, despite their royal titles, nobody actually rules anybody else. And Cedric himself holds the title of prince. One more thing to note about Philly Princess.
Is that canon in the show that he's a prince?
I don't think it's ever been mentioned in the show. Maybe it has, but I can't
Okay.
remember it. But in the toy line, he's identified as a prince. One more thing to note about Philly Princess. If you've seen any of the show, you've probably noticed that they all wear crowns. This is something that began in Philly Princess. Each character was given a crown to kind of denote their royal status. The toys, they added these little Swarovski crystals into them for a little extra flair. And this ended up being something of kind of a staple of the toy line from then on. People came to associate Philly with crowns, so in the future toy lines, Draco just continued adding crowns onto the Philly toys. And that's kind of the story behind the crowns, I guess. So, next up we have Will, who is short for Willow, actually. He's kind of the joker or prankster of the group. He doesn't take his classes seriously, but he can be very competent when he's really determined.
No, he can't.
He is a fairy filly. Fairy fillies are easily identifiable by their green insect-like wings. Note that the characters are now divided into separate family trees, here in the family tree line in the upper right. And the fairy fillies are ruled by this guy in the bottom right. His name is Magic, and he is the king of the fairy fillies.
That's a guy?
Yes, that is a guy. Cool. Another notable fairy filly in the show is Twilight, who's a teacher.
There's something very familiar about her face.
Kind of one of the reasons I stuck this image in the upper right here is I wanted to say they really don't pay any attention to these rankings because Twilight does have an intelligence of 100. Who I don't think I want this filly teaching my kids, but
She's a professor?
yes,
Yes.
he is a professor.
I mean, Cedric was listed with 200 intelligence, and he's supposed to be smart.
Right, that also. And she probably knows somebody important. So next up we got Rose, who is a unicorn filly. Unicorn filly came out in 2011, and Rose is kind of the main character of the show in a way. Most of the stories kind of revolve around her in some way. She's the most mature of the main 5 characters.
That expression.
Did I use that same image in the other?
Yeah.
I think I did.
Alright.
No, it's slightly different.
Slight- okay.
Yeah. I feel like I'm at a lower. I feel like she's looking down on
Yeah.
me even more in this picture.
She kind of feels a need to prove herself, wants everything to be right, and so she has a tendency to volunteer for a lot of things and take on a lot of responsibility. This can be stressful for her though, and she worries a lot about what others think of her. Unicorn fillies live in the land called Crystalia, which is made up of 5 floating islands surrounded by Central Island. And the unicorn filly line introduced something that would become important to the filly toy line, and that is the filly rainbow, which is kind of in the bottom middle there. You can see that rainbow. The filly rainbow is divided into 5 different colors, and each of these 5 colors is associated with one of the 5 islands surrounding the Central Island. And they are associated with one of 5 attributes. The attributes are love, beauty, festivity, friendship, and dreams. And filly unicorns are now also divided into 5 different families. Instead of having like one family tree or a couple family trees, you got 5 trees, each associated with one of these attributes. Rose is from the island of Amoria, which is associated with light pink, and her attribute is love. Incidentally note, when I say light pink, that's not her like coat color, because even though she is light pink, that's not what is associated with the filly rainbow. The filly rainbow is actually more associated with the color of her horn and her crystal in her crown. And so those are...
Remember that, there's going to be a quiz when we're done.
Unicorn fillies can travel between the islands along rainbows, but they need a crystal in order to walk on a rainbow, and they can only step on the rainbow associated with their own color. This is kind of interesting when I consider that Rose actually arrives at the academy in the opening of the show along a rainbow. So the central island is called Iridia, and that is the home of Princess Sparkle. So Princess Sparkle actually is not associated with any particular unicorn group. If you look at her crown, she has the colors of the entire filly rainbow in her crown, and that kind of denotes her as the ruler. This is something that would continue with future filly lines. And in the show, Filly Funtasia, she is the principal of the academy. And for no particular reason, here's a shot of Princess Sparkle standing with Twilight.
I don't get it.
There's supposed to be some sort of association there? What?
So here's an early imagining of the Philly world when only Philly, Princess, Fairy, and Unicorn existed. Note that in the lore, none of these different Philly races ever traveled between their different worlds. They all the stories kind of kept within their own particular realm. Funtasia is a new area created for the show, and it's the first time that different Philly races have ever actually mingled with one another.
Mingled.
Next character is Bella, short for Isabella. She's an elf Philly, which came out in 2012. She's kind of a little ditzy in a way, I think. She kind of, she's kind of happy-go-lucky, I guess, sort of. Looks on the bright side. She likes to eat. She's somewhat more interested in her appearance than most Phillies tend to be. And note also that elf Phillies can be identified by their pointy ears, and they also have wings on their crown. Another thing is that female elf Phillies have necklaces, and that's where in the toys their Swarovski crystals are, and males wear a band around their front leg. Elf Phillies live in a land called Emosia, and the Philly rainbow in elf Philly lore is based on moods. So they actually have a river of moods going through the land of Emosia. And these moods are tricky, lucky, happy, beauty, and loving. And Bella is associated with beauty. I don't know if you can read the card there. It's kind of small, but it says for the beauty realm, here you find the pretty elves who are the guardians of beauty and Emosia and naturally boast the most beautiful looks. So I think this is kind of why you sometimes see Bella kind of thinking about her appearance a bit more than some of the other Phillies. Last up of the 5 main characters, we have Lynn. Lynn is a witchy Philly, which came out in 2013. Incidentally, this is the last toy line that would be produced by Simba before they stopped making the toys. She's described as a trickster like Will. She can be like sarcastic and teasing. She's a bit blunt when she talks. She's high-spirited with a bit of a tendency to bend the rules. Witchy Phillies are the most magical race in the Philly lore. At this point, they stopped using the beauty, speed, and intelligence ranking, probably for the best. But witchy Phillies get their magic from their capes. And so the color of their cape is kind of what the Philly rainbow is based on in the Witchy Philly toy line. And the 5 different types of magic here are light, flower, water, wind, and heart. The cape color for Lynn is green, and that represents wind, which is kind of interesting also because you see that she's described as being associated with storms. And when she gets like upset, supposedly storms start to develop, and there is an episode in the show where we see Lynn in a very emotional state, and there's also a big storm developing in the background. Not necessarily because of her, but it's kind of an interesting coincidence that it's happening at the same time. Witchy Phillies live in a land called Zimsala, which is kind of like a mystical land. It's often depicted as nighttime. It has pink trees, and everything there is based on a 13-hour clock, which is kept in the main castle. That's the clock on the right there. And
Are all these different lands, are they canon in the current TV show, or is that sort of just...
they're never really mentioned in the TV show, but it can be implied. It's implied that they are because the TV show does acknowledge that Funtasia is a floating island.
Okay.
And so it's kind of separate from what these other lands would be. And it does, as I said, show Rose kind of arriving at the academy along the rainbow. So she's obviously coming from someplace other than Funtasia.
Right.
So the main castle is where these two live, and these are the rulers of the Witchy Philly area, and that is Abra and Kadabra. These are probably the 2 most magical characters in the entire Philly canon.
Alakazam.
So Abra is like a kind and benevolent ruler. Kadabra, on the other hand, is something of a trickster. This is actually concept art for the show on the right here. So, although we haven't seen it yet, we may actually end up seeing these guys, or maybe at least one of them, in the show at some point, if it ever airs again.
Maybe someday.
Yeah, just wait another 5 years.
Also, Lynn is best Philly.
That's all.
Another one, not one of the main 5, but I'm adding Zach in here. This is Zach.
Just me.
Yeah,
Just be.
like Zach for some reason.
He's the only competent character in this show. And he has wings.
Yeah. So I'm including Zach though because Zach is representative of another toy line, which is Philly Stars, and it would be the last toy line to come out before the show airs. Actually, interestingly enough, the show kind of announced and started showing promos of Zach before his actual toy line came out.
So wait, this character's name is Zach.
Yeah, Zach.
Yes, I'm probably an alicorn.
Congrats. So Star Phillies have both a horn and wings. Zach is probably the most mature student. He's an assistant